8 of the hospital's top surgeons stood frozen as the billionaire's wife went still on the operating table. But a janitor watching through the glass saw something that made her freeze in disbelief, and in the next 10 seconds she'd have to choose: walk away and say nothing, or step into that room and risk everything. Inside Operating Suite 1 of New York Crest Medical Tower, time seemed to stop. The hum of machines dulled into silence, the rhythmic beeping that had filled the room seconds ago now eerily absent. Every head turned toward the center of the glass-walled theater where Clara Rothman, 34, lay motionless beneath the harsh white lights. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then chaos erupted. "Check the vitals again," said Dr. Evelyn Hart, her voice sharp but calm, honed from decades of command under pressure. "Verify the sync link. Someone talk to me." Technicians scrambled around the room, checking cords and sensors. The neural sync interface, Rothman Biotech's pride and joy, glowed faintly on the nearby monitor. Data streams flickered, jittering between static lines and unreadable code. Dr. Hart's gloved hand hovered over the sterile field, her eyes narrowing. "I want oxygen saturation confirmed. Now." "She's unresponsive," a nurse whispered, voice trembling. Outside the glass doors, Daniel Rothman stood frozen in his tailored gray suit, hands pressed against the barrier that separated power from helplessness. At 42, Daniel carried himself with the precision of a man who never lost. His empire, hospitals, research labs, regenerative biotech startups, all bore the same mantra carved into their mission walls: "We don't fail." But as he stared through the glass at the woman who had stood beside him in every victory, failure suddenly had a face. On the far side of the corridor, Aaliyah Brooks paused her mop mid-swipe. The night had been quiet, the kind of quiet she loved. The scent of disinfectant, the soft squeak of her sneakers against the waxed floors, the distant hum of elevators. The VIP wing always gleamed brighter than the rest of the hospital, with golden wall sconces, marble floors, and a silence too rich for comfort. She wasn't supposed to linger here. The instructions were clear: clean quickly, stay invisible, move on. But when the alarm started flashing red, she looked up. Through the circular glass window of Suite 1, she caught sight of the commotion. Inside, the doctors surrounded the operating table like a circle of fire. The patient's pale hand slipped slightly off the drape, still and perfect under the bright light. Aaliyah's mop clattered softly against the bucket. She shouldn't look. But she couldn't turn away. Dr. Hart's team moved in a rhythm, efficient, synchronized, methodical. But beneath their precision lay something raw: confusion. "The system's dropping data packets again," one technician muttered. "NeuralSync's feedback loop isn't reading brain activity." "That's impossible," Dr. Hart said flatly. "Reboot the receiver." The screen flickered once, twice, then steadied. Still nothing. Dr. Hart clenched her jaw. "We're pausing. Everyone hold position." Silence fell once more, a silence so heavy it made even the air seem afraid to move. Outside, Daniel pressed his forehead to the glass. He'd designed this hospital to symbolize control, innovation, perfection. But no machine in the world could rewrite this moment. Aaliyah took a cautious step closer to the window. She wasn't sure what she expected. Maybe a sign that the doctors had fixed it, maybe movement. But what she saw next made her heart jolt. Clara's fingers twitched. 3 short taps. A pause. Then 2 more. Aaliyah froze. Her brain scrambled for logic. Maybe it was just muscle memory, maybe a random nerve spasm. But something about it didn't feel random. It felt like intention, like someone knocking from the inside. Did she just... She whispered to herself. Inside, the doctors were too focused on their monitors to notice. "Dr. Hart," one nurse said softly. "Do you want to?" "Not now," the surgeon snapped, her eyes locked on the numbers still frozen on screen. We need to stabilize signal output before we do anything. Aaliyah leaned forward until her breath fogged the glass. Tap, tap, tap. Pause. Tap, tap. Her pulse hammered in her ears. "Oh my God," she murmured. "She's trying to say something." "Sir, you'll need to wait outside," a nurse told Daniel as he tried to open the viewing room door. "They're doing everything they can." Daniel didn't respond. His reflection stared back at him. Pale, stunned, unrecognizable. Inside, Dr. Hart finally exhaled, her steady professionalism cracking for just a second. "We're transferring her to intensive monitoring. I want secondary verification before we continue." "Understood," the team replied in unison. As they began disconnecting the monitoring leads, Aaliyah couldn't take it anymore. She stepped forward and rapped lightly on the glass window. "Wait," she called out, voice trembling. She moved. Every head turned toward the sound. Through her mask, Dr. Hart's eyes flashed irritation. "Who is that?" A nurse near the door frowned. "It's the janitor, ma'am. I saw her hand." Aaliyah insisted, louder now. "She's not gone, she's—" "Miss, please step away from the observation area," the nurse interrupted, moving toward the door. "But she—" "Step away now, or we'll have to call security." The door opened, and two uniformed guards appeared at Aaliyah's side. "Ma'am, you're not authorized in this corridor," one said gently but firmly. She tried to pull free, still staring past them through the glass. "I'm telling you," she moved. "You can't stop." The guard's tone hardened. "Let's go, miss." Her voice cracked. "Please, just look at her hand." But her words vanished beneath the mechanical whir of the operating suite's doors sliding shut. As the guards guided her down the corridor, she looked back one last time. Through the narrow window, the doctors were reattaching wires. Daniel stood motionless in the observation room, and for a fleeting second Clara's eyelids fluttered. Just once. Just enough. Aaliyah stopped walking, heart pounding in her chest. The guards urged her forward, but she barely heard them. That flicker had been real. She knew it. Something deep inside whispered what logic wouldn't dare say aloud. Clara Rothman wasn't gone. She was trapped. When Aaliyah finally reached the end of the corridor, she turned back toward the glowing suite. The sterile lights reflected against the polished floors, stretching like a mirror into infinity. For everyone else, the night would end here, another routine emergency handled by professionals. But for Aaliyah Brooks, that flicker behind the glass had changed everything. She didn't know how or why, but she knew one thing with absolute certainty. The woman on that table was still trying to reach them. And Aaliyah was the only one who saw it. The fluorescent lights of New York Crest Medical Tower glared down as the night shift ended, bleaching the world into sterile white. The corridors were empty now. No alarms, no shouting doctors, no billionaires pacing behind glass. Just the faint squeak of Aaliyah Brooks's sneakers as she wheeled her cleaning cart toward the supply closet, her head still buzzing with what she'd seen. Clara Rothman's eyelids had flickered. That single tiny movement played on repeat behind Aaliyah's eyes like a ghostly film loop. 3 taps. Pause. 2 taps. Then that brief flutter, a whisper of life no one else had noticed. The other janitors were clocking out, laughing softly, swapping gossip about overtime pay and cafeteria food. Aaliyah didn't join in. She finished scrubbing her assigned hallway, returned the mop to its rack, and stood there in the silence, her heart still racing. She wanted to tell someone. She wanted to shout it from the rooftop. But who would believe a janitor when a dozen doctors hadn't? By the time she got home, the city was sleeping under a haze of streetlight fog. Their apartment was on the 5th floor of a brick walk-up in Harlem, the kind of place where the paint peeled near the windows and the elevator hadn't worked in months. Her mother was still awake, sitting on the couch with a blanket wrapped around her legs, a worn paperback open on her lap. Angela Brooks had always been the calm to Aaliyah's storm. Tired eyes, gentle voice, but steel underneath. Years of fighting illness had thinned her frame, yet her presence still filled the room. "You're home late," her mother said softly. "Double shift again?" Aaliyah hesitated, slipping off her jacket. "Yeah. Something happened at work." Angela looked up from her book. "What kind of something?" "The Rothmans," Aaliyah said quietly. "You know, the billionaire couple. Mrs. Rothman was in surgery tonight, and I saw—" She stopped, the words catching. "I saw her move. Everyone said she was unresponsive, but she wasn't. Her hand tapped. Like a signal." Angela's expression shifted from curiosity to concern. "Aaliyah," she said carefully, "did you tell anyone?" "I tried," Aaliyah said, frustration rising. "They called security. I swear, Mama, she moved. I saw it clear as day." Angela sighed and set her book aside. "Listen to me, baby. In their world, speaking up can cost you more than your job. Those people, they don't like being told they missed something, especially by someone in a cleaning uniform." Aaliyah looked down at her hands, still red from disinfectant. "So I'm just supposed to pretend I didn't see anything?" Her mother's gaze softened. "I'm saying be careful. Sometimes the truth isn't welcome, especially when it comes from the wrong mouth." That night, Aaliyah lay awake in the narrow bed she'd slept in since high school. The city murmured outside. Sirens, laughter, the low hum of subway tracks. Sleep wouldn't come. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw those fingers tapping on the operating table. 3. Pause. 2. She remembered being 10 years old, standing in another hospital hallway that smelled like bleach and loss. Her grandmother had been lying in a bed much like Clara's, frail, whispering words no one understood. Nurses passed by, faces indifferent, voices clipped. "Please," her mother had begged back then. "She's trying to say something. Can someone come look?" But no one did. The next morning, her grandmother was gone. It was the first time Aaliyah learned that silence could kill. By morning, exhaustion pressed against her ribs, but she still went to work. Bills didn't care about lost sleep. The hospital buzzed with low, careful whispers when she arrived. The overnight shift nurses huddled by the coffee machine. She caught fragments as she walked past. Complications during the Rothman procedure. Unresponsive since last night. They're keeping it quiet, PR's handling it. Aaliyah paused, pretending to wipe down the counter while listening. "They moved her to the ICU," one nurse said. "Private floor, locked down. They don't want the press sniffing around." Unresponsive. Quiet observation. Those words chilled her. She spent the rest of the morning pretending to clean, her mind working on its own loop. What if Clara Rothman was still trying to communicate? What if no one was listening, again? By evening, the halls had thinned. Visiting hours were over. The VIP wing dimmed to its nighttime hush. Aaliyah wheeled her cleaning cart past the elevators, glancing toward the restricted corridor that led to the ICU. Her pulse quickened. She shouldn't. She knew that. But the image of those tapping fingers burned in her chest like a dare. She waited until 2 nurses walked by discussing shift rotations, then quietly slipped through the side door before it clicked shut. The ICU was colder here, quieter. Machines hummed softly in the darkened rooms, lights blinking like fireflies. At the end of the hall, she found her. Clara Rothman lay motionless in a private suite, surrounded by sleek equipment and silence. Her skin was pale against the crisp white linens. The machines beside her pulsed gently, a soft rhythmic sound that almost blended with the whisper of air conditioning. Aaliyah's heart thudded as she stepped closer. "Mrs. Rothman," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Can you hear me?" No answer. She hesitated, then leaned in near the bed. It's me. Aaliyah. I saw you yesterday. Still nothing. She sighed, about to turn away, when she noticed it. A faint mist inside the oxygen mask. Just a trace of condensation forming and fading. Aaliyah blinked, leaning closer. There it was again, a tiny puff of moisture on the glass. A rhythm. Inhale. Exhale. Her breath caught. Oh my God. The mist came again, steady now, as though the body on the bed was fighting through layers of stillness to reach her. Aaliyah pressed a trembling hand to her mouth, eyes wide. She's trying to breathe. The sound of footsteps echoed faintly from the corridor outside, jolting her back into motion. She glanced once more at the mask, the fragile rise and fall of vapor, before backing away. Her cleaning cart waited by the door, like an accomplice in some quiet rebellion. She slipped out just as a pair of nurses passed, forcing herself to walk normally down the hall, heart hammering so loud she was sure they'd hear it. When she reached the supply closet, she stopped, gripping the handle for balance. She wasn't imagining it. She knew she wasn't. Clara Rothman wasn't gone. She was there, fighting beneath the machines, waiting for someone to notice. And for reasons Aaliyah didn't yet understand, it felt like that someone was meant to be her. That night, as she walked out into the cool city air, the words repeated in her mind like a heartbeat. She's trying to breathe. The world around her went on as usual. Taxis honking, neon lights flickering, people rushing home. But Aaliyah knew something had shifted. Invisible hands were reaching out for help inside that hospital, and she was the only one who'd felt their touch. Rain streaked the windows of New York Crest Medical Tower, turning the night outside into a blur of silver and shadow. Inside, the halls glowed sterile and quiet. Too quiet for what Aaliyah Brooks had just seen. Her mind reeled as she hurried toward the nurse's station, her shoes squeaking against the polished floor. She's trying to breathe. The thought pounded in her skull with every step. She's alive in there. The overnight staff was half asleep, sipping coffee and chatting softly. The head nurse, a woman with perfectly set blonde curls and the kind of calm that came from decades of authority, looked up as Aaliyah approached. "Excuse me," Aaliyah said, breathless. "Mrs. Rothman, she's breathing. I just saw it. There's condensation inside her mask, like she's trying to." The nurse smiled politely, the kind of smile meant to calm children or people who didn't understand how hospitals worked. "Machines do that sometimes, honey," she said, voice sugary and dismissive. "Pressure in the lines. Changes in temperature. It happens." "No," Aaliyah insisted, shaking her head. "It wasn't the machine. I saw it twice. She's—" "Honey," the nurse interrupted gently but firmly, glancing at the name tag on Aaliyah's uniform. "Aaliyah, right? Listen, I know this must be upsetting, but the patient you're talking about is in critical care. You really shouldn't be anywhere near that wing." "But she's alive," Aaliyah pressed, her voice rising. "You have to check her again." The nurse's expression didn't change. "Why don't you take a break? I'll let the doctor know you're concerned, okay?" "You're not listening." That drew a few stares. A doctor walking by frowned at the janitor causing a scene at 2 a.m. The nurse's polite smile stiffened. "Aaliyah, lower your voice," she said, warning now creeping into her tone. "We can't have staff interrupting patient care." "I'm not interrupting anything." The nurse sighed and reached for the phone. "Security, please come to the ICU station." Aaliyah's stomach dropped. "You're calling security? For telling you she's breathing?" Within moments, 2 guards appeared, the same ones who had escorted her out the night before. One was tall and expressionless, the other clearly uncomfortable. "Miss Brooks," the taller guard said, "you've been warned before about restricted areas. We need you to come with us." Aaliyah's hands clenched into fists. "You people don't get it. That woman's alive and no one's doing anything." The head nurse gave her a look of pity, the kind that said, "Poor thing, too emotional to understand. Sweetheart, I know you think you saw something, but you need to leave this to the professionals." The word hit her like a slap. Professionals. It was always the same. They wore the white coats, the polished badges, the expensive watches, and people like her mopped their floors. Her truth didn't fit in their world. The guards led her out without another word. Across the hospital, behind the frosted glass of a conference room, Dr. Evelyn Hart stood with two other physicians, studying the data from the Rothman procedure. The monitors cast blue light across their faces. "This doesn't make sense," muttered Dr. Singh, the neurotech specialist. "The neural feedback shows delay activity, almost residual response, long after the anesthetic should have cut everything off." Dr. Hart folded her arms, her expression unreadable. The neural sync interface must have malfunctioned. Run diagnostics again. Singh frowned. "I did. Twice. The readings are inconsistent, but they're there. It's like the signal didn't shut down when it was supposed to." Dr. Hart's voice hardened. "That device was designed by Rothman Biotech. We don't question its calibration unless we have proof." A silence hung in the air. They all knew what was at stake. Questioning the tech meant questioning the man whose name was etched on the building. That man arrived just past midnight. Daniel Rothman swept through the private entrance flanked by two aides, his tailored coat still wet from the rain. The look in his eyes was pure calculation. Not grief, not fear, just control. Dr. Hart met him outside the ICU. "Mr. Rothman, I was about to—" "I don't want updates," he interrupted sharply. "I want containment." She blinked. "Sir, this cannot reach the press," he said. "Not a word. No leaks, no rumors. I've already had to assure shareholders this was a routine procedure." Dr. Hart hesitated. "With respect, your wife's condition isn't something that can be handled as a—" "I said contain it," he snapped. "I'll handle the board. You handle your staff." And just like that, he was gone, his footsteps echoing down the corridor like the fading of a gavel. The next morning, Aaliyah sat in the tiny office outside Environmental Services, the smell of bleach sharp in the air. Her supervisor, Mr. Collins, shuffled a stack of HR papers with the weary look of someone who hated his job almost as much as the people who made him do it. "I'm sorry, Brooks," he said finally, "but the ICU incident last night, it's serious. They're saying you breached protocol and disrupted care." "I was trying to save someone's life," she said quietly. "I get it," he replied, lowering his voice. "But this is Rothman's hospital. You don't go shouting at nurses about their patients." He slid a form across the desk. "Administrative suspension pending review." Aaliyah stared at it. "So I get punished for trying to tell the truth?" "Look," he said, his tone almost sympathetic. "Take a week. Rest. Maybe when things calm down they'll let you back." She stood, trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief. "You mean when I learn to keep my head down?" He didn't answer. That evening, the rain returned. Harder this time, hammering against the city like it meant to drown it. Aaliyah sat on the curb outside the hospital, uniform damp, mop bucket beside her like a loyal companion. The world blurred in the puddles at her feet, reflections of headlights, the glow of emergency signs, and her own tired eyes staring back. No one saw her. No one ever did. She thought of her mother's warning. In their world, speaking up can cost you more than your job. Maybe she was right. A gust of wind scattered paper across the sidewalk. Aaliyah gathered them automatically. Wrappers, coffee receipts, a crumpled note. Then she heard it. Two orderlies talking near the loading dock. They said the neural sync didn't shut off properly, one whispered. It kept logging signals after the system went dark. Aaliyah froze. Yeah, the other replied. Dr. Singh was freaking out. Said it's like the patient's brain was still active, but the readings were ignored. They're wiping the logs. Her pulse spiked. Still active. She turned to look back at the glowing tower of glass and light behind her. Somewhere inside, Clara Rothman lay under machines that might be hiding the truth. The rain drenched her shoulders, cold and heavy, but clarity cut through the storm like lightning. They were covering something up, and she wasn't done. Aaliyah stood, gripping her mop handle like a weapon. Her breath came fast, her heart steady. They could ignore her voice, mock her title, erase her shift from the records, but they couldn't erase what she saw. She was going to find proof herself. And when she did, no one in that hospital, not the nurses, not Dr. Hart, not even Daniel Rothman, would be able to look away again. The rain hadn't stopped. It fell in thin silver sheets that blurred the hospital's glowing windows into ghostly rectangles of light. Aaliyah stood beneath the loading dock awning, the chill cutting through her thin janitor's jacket. She watched a delivery truck rumble away, tires hissing on wet pavement, and whispered to herself, "They're hiding something." That certainty, the same one that had driven her back to the ICU, had burned away her fear. All she needed now was proof. She glanced toward the service entrance on the west side of the building. Most staff had gone home. Night shift IT stayed later, maintaining the endless hum of New York Crest's digital systems. Its servers, its patient records, and, if her hunch was right, its secrets. The maintenance wing sat 2 floors below the main hospital, an industrial maze of humming pipes and buzzing lights. The air smelled of metal and damp cement. Luis Delgado worked there most nights, half technician, half miracle worker. He was one of the few who treated her like a person, not background noise. She found him where she expected, in the server room, leaning back in a rolling chair, scrolling through his phone. His blue work vest glowed under the cold fluorescent light. "Aaliyah," he said, startled. "What are you doing down here? You're suspended, remember." "I need your help," she said, stepping closer. Luis sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. "That's not a great start." "It's about Mrs. Rothman." He frowned. "Don't tell me you're still chasing that." "I'm not chasing anything," she said, her voice low but steady. "I saw her move. Twice. The doctors ignored it. And I heard the orderlies talking last night. The neural sync system, it didn't shut down properly. You work with those logs, right?" Luis stiffened. His chair creaked as he turned to face the blinking rows of server racks. "That's not public data, Aaliyah. It's internal. Encrypted. Accessing it without clearance could get me fired, or worse." "I'm not asking you to steal," she said quickly. "Just to look. To see if something's there. If I'm wrong, fine. I'll walk away." Luis hesitated. "If this leaks, we're done. You understand that." Aaliyah met his eyes. "She's alive, Luis. I can't just forget that." For a long moment, the only sound was the low hum of machines. Finally, he exhaled and muttered, "You're going to get me in trouble." He logged into the hospital's secure database, fingers moving fast over the keyboard. Lines of code scrolled down the screen. Patient IDs, timestamps, encrypted files. "Each surgery has a neural sync file," he explained. "It records brainwave activity during anesthesia. The Rothman file's restricted to level 6 access. Can you bypass it?" Luis gave her a look. "You don't just bypass Daniel Rothman's firewalls. This man built the system that built the system. But," he leaned closer to the screen, "I might know a way." He inserted a diagnostic key, a small metal drive that gave maintenance teams temporary system privileges. The monitor flickered, then loaded a black window filled with coded numbers. Luis muttered something in Spanish under his breath. "All right. We're in, but if security flags this login, they'll trace it." "Then we work fast," Aaliyah said. He opened the file labeled NR, sync_log_Clara Rothman _03.14.25. The timestamp read, Operation End Time, 3:42 a.m. Underneath that, streams of data appeared, neural frequency patterns plotted over time. The graph spiked, flattened, then continued. Luis frowned. "Wait. What? This isn't right. The system should have ended here, when Dr. Hart stopped the procedure. But these readings go on for another 2 hours." Aaliyah stepped closer, eyes scanning the monitor. "What does that mean?" "It means..." Luis hesitated. "It means the system declared her unresponsive when she wasn't." The words hung in the air like static. Aaliyah's throat tightened. She stared at the faint rhythm on the screen. Small peaks, uneven, but alive. She was still in there, she whispered. Her brain, her mind was still active. Luis rubbed his temples. If this data's real, it could mean neural sync failed to detect post-anesthesia response. But if Rothman's company knew, they covered it up, she finished. They let them think she was gone. Luis turned to her, eyes serious now. "You need to listen to me. If anyone finds out we access this, we're done. Rothman has internal surveillance, cameras, digital tracers. He doesn't just protect his technology, he protects himself." "So what do we do?" "We don't do anything," Luis said firmly. "We close the file and forget it exists." Aaliyah stared at the data pulsing faintly across the screen, the ghostly pattern of a woman's mind fighting to be heard. She shook her head. "I can't." Before Luis could stop her, she reached for her own flash drive and plugged it into the terminal. The progress bar began to fill. Luis cursed under his breath. "Aaliyah, are you crazy? If this gets traced..." "I need proof," she said. "They'll call me a liar otherwise. I need to show them she was alive." The loading bar crept forward, slow as a heartbeat. 80%, Luis muttered. Come on, come on." Aaliyah's pulse matched the rhythm of the loading bar. The lights from the servers cast eerie patterns on their faces. Blue, green, flickering shadows. Finally, the bar flashed transfer complete. She pulled the drive free and slipped it into her pocket. Her hands trembled. Luis exhaled shakily. "You have no idea what you just did." "Yeah," Aaliyah said softly. "I think I do." A faint sound echoed from the corridor outside, the unmistakable click of a door. Luis froze. Someone's coming. The security panel beside the door beeped twice, the red indicator light turning green. Footsteps. Aaliyah's mind raced. There was nowhere to hide, just rows of server racks and a single exit. Luis's whisper was sharp. "Put it away now." Aaliyah glanced around, panicked. Her pockets were too obvious. The flash drive was small, metal, reflective. The light from the servers would give it away. Without thinking, she crouched and slipped it into her shoe, tucking it beneath the insole. The door opened. Dr. Evelyn Hart stepped in, her lab coat trailing behind her like a shadow. "Mr. Delgado," she said smoothly. "You're here late." Luis forced a smile, his fingers hovering casually over the keyboard. "Just running diagnostics, ma'am. Routine server check." Her sharp eyes swept the room. Strange. The system pinged an unauthorized access attempt 20 minutes ago. Aaliyah kept her back turned, pretending to wipe the floor near the wall, her heart thundering in her ears. Dr. Hart's gaze lingered. "You're not usually down here, are you?" she asked, her tone cool but pointed. Aaliyah swallowed hard. "Maintenance, ma'am. Just cleaning up." Dr. Hart's expression didn't change. "Make sure you do." She turned back to Luis. "And if you see any irregularities in the system logs, you'll report them directly to me. Immediately." "Of course," Luis said quickly. She left as abruptly as she'd entered, the door hissing shut behind her. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Luis finally whispered, "You need to get out of here. Now." Aaliyah nodded, her pulse still racing. She didn't dare look back as she left the maintenance wing, the echo of Dr. Hart's footsteps still ringing in her ears. In her shoe, the flash drive pressed against her heel. Small, metallic, burning like truth trying to escape. She had what she came for. But now, she realized, they'd know someone had been looking. The flash drive pressed against Aaliyah's heel as she walked through the dim corridor, every step a reminder of the secret now in her possession. The hospital was quieter than she'd ever heard it. No beeping machines, no hurried footsteps, just the soft hum of life suspended in stillness. She paused by the window overlooking the city. Rain still streaked the glass, the neon glow of taxis blurring into rivers of gold and red below. Somewhere above her, Clara Rothman lay between silence and survival, her faint presence trapped beneath the weight of machines and disbelief. Aaliyah's mind wouldn't rest. The neural sync data had been undeniable. Clara's brain activity had continued for hours after the operation had ended. She had been alive in there. And now the proof of that truth burned at the back of Aaliyah's mind, refusing to fade. She couldn't wait. Not another night. The ICU was cloaked in soft midnight light, the kind that turned polished steel into silver. The nurses had retreated to their stations, their voices low. Aaliyah moved silently, her cleaning cart rolling in front of her like cover. Inside the cart, wrapped beneath a folded sheet, sat a portable cardiac monitor she had borrowed from the supply storage. It was small, a handheld device used for maintenance checks on defibrillators, but it could detect even the faintest bioelectric pulse. Her hands trembled as she slipped into the private suite. Clara Rothman lay still, just as before. Her skin pale, her expression calm. Machines blinked softly, steady and impersonal. Aaliyah set the monitor down beside the bed. For a moment she simply stood there, listening to the hush around her. "I don't know if you can hear me," she whispered, voice shaking. "But I believe you're still here. I believe you've been trying to tell us." She reached for Clara's arm, delicate, cool, and gently attached the electrode pads. The wires trembled between her fingers. The monitor screen blinked to life, its faint blue light casting shadows across the room. For a long moment nothing happened. The line stayed flat. Aaliyah held her breath, willing it to move. "Come on," she whispered. "Please." Seconds stretched like hours. Then a flicker. A faint blip of movement on the screen. Aaliyah's eyes widened. The line dipped, rose again. Once. Twice. The sound came next, the soft, uneven beep that echoed like a whisper of heartbeat through the sterile air. Her knees nearly gave out. "Oh my God," she breathed. The rhythm strengthened, slow but steady. She stumbled toward the intercom panel, slamming her hand on the emergency button. "Help! Someone come! She's responding. Mrs. Rothman's responding." Her voice carried through the corridor. Alarms flared. Footsteps thundered down the hall. Two nurses burst in, confusion flashing across their faces. "What are you doing here?" one demanded. "Look." Aaliyah pointed at the monitor, tears streaming down her cheeks. "She's responding, she's here." The nurse frowned, stepping closer, then froze. The readings were clear. The second nurse grabbed the wall intercom. "Code assist in VIP ICU. I need Dr. Hart now." Within moments, the quiet ICU exploded into controlled chaos. Doctors flooded the room, wheeling in additional equipment. Cables, lights, monitors. The sterile ballet of emergency medicine began again. Dr. Evelyn Hart pushed through the door, still in her night scrubs, eyes sharp and alert. "What happened?" She reconnected her. One nurse began, but Aaliyah cut in, voice trembling. "She's responding. Check the readings. Please." Dr. Hart shot her a hard look, but her eyes flicked to the monitor, and then she stopped moving altogether. The data was clear. Faint but steady signals. Impossible. Hart's gloved hand moved instinctively to Clara's wrist. For a second she stood motionless, her jaw tightening. Then her voice came out low, controlled. "Get me full monitoring. Connect the neural interface again. Now." The team moved with precision. Wires clicked into ports. Machines hummed. On the screen, the faint neurological map began to glow again, waves flickering in fragile rhythm. "Ma'am," one of the doctors whispered. "There's spontaneous response." Dr. Hart didn't answer. She leaned close to Clara's face, watching every detail. The rise of the chest, the flutter at the corner of her eyelid. Then, with almost supernatural calm, she said, "Mrs. Rothman, if you can hear me, move your hand." For a heartbeat, the room held its breath. Then Clara's fingers twitched. 3 taps, pause, 2 taps. A nurse gasped. Another covered her mouth. "Oh my God," someone whispered. Aaliyah pressed her hands to her face, sobbing quietly. "She's talking to you," she whispered. "I told you she was." Dr. Hart swallowed hard, eyes fixed on the patient. "Get her stabilized. Keep those readings locked." And then the impossible happened. Clara's eyelids fluttered again, slower this time, more deliberate. Her lashes trembled, her mouth twitched. "Mrs. Rothman?" Dr. Hart said softly. "Can you hear me?" Clara's head moved a fraction, the faintest nod. The room broke into motion again, nurses scrambling to recheck her oxygen levels, techs calling out readings, someone yelling, "We've got responsive movement." Aaliyah stood frozen at the foot of the bed, tears mixing with the fluorescent light on her cheeks. She had been right. All along. The woman everyone thought unreachable was fighting her way back. The door burst open behind them. Daniel Rothman strode in, his suit jacket still damp from the rain, his expression unreadable. For a moment no one spoke. The sight before him, the doctors swarming, the monitors alive with light, his wife's faint movement, should have been cause for joy, relief. But instead, his face went pale. "Daniel," Dr. Hart said carefully, stepping toward him, "she's responding. We're getting activity." He stared past her at the monitors, his eyes cold and calculating. "How?" he said finally, his voice quiet, almost too calm. "How did this happen?" Aaliyah turned, startled. "She was never gone," she said, voice breaking. "You just didn't see it." For a flicker of a second, something like fear flashed across his face, not of loss but of exposure. He looked from Aaliyah to Dr. Hart, then back to the glowing monitors. "Shut it down," he whispered. Dr. Hart blinked. "What?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "I said shut it down. Disconnect the non-essential systems. Now." The room fell silent. The hum of machines filled the void. And in that silence, Aaliyah knew, this miracle she had helped uncover wasn't just about saving a life. It had unearthed something much bigger. Something dangerous. The celebration never came. By dawn, the ICU was spotless again, as if the night before had been erased. The machines still hummed, but the air had changed. Nurses spoke in hushed tones, doctors kept their heads down, and security officers lingered near every door. The miracle that had brought Clara Rothman back to the world was already being buried under protocol and silence. Aaliyah watched from the far end of the hallway, clutching her ID badge in both hands. She should have felt proud. She had done the impossible. Seen what no one else saw, believed when everyone dismissed her. But now all she felt was dread. The looks from the medical staff weren't of admiration. They were warnings. When Daniel Rothman entered the restricted conference room with Dr. Hart and a handful of senior physicians, the glass walls clouded automatically for privacy. Aaliyah stood by her cart, pretending to clean, but every muscle in her body strained to listen. Inside, Daniel's voice was calm but cold. "We need to contain this," he said. "If word gets out, we lose everything." Dr. Hart's tone was sharp but weary. "Daniel, your wife's recovery is a medical breakthrough. We should be studying it, not hiding it." "Studying it." He gave a dry laugh. "Evelyn, do you understand what will happen if the public learns that neural sync misread her signals? That the system declared her unresponsive when she wasn't? Hospitals worldwide use this tech. Stockholders will panic. Lawsuits will bury us." One of the board members, a man with silver hair and a perfect tie, spoke up. "If we move fast, we can recalibrate the interface and claim it was a sensor anomaly." Quietly. Daniel nodded. "Exactly. Which means every record from last night needs to disappear. The logs, the monitor readings, the backup drives." Dr. Hart stared at him, stunned. "That's falsification of medical data." "It's damage control," he said, his voice smooth as glass. "The patient is stable, which means we can rewrite the narrative. A malfunction was detected early, corrected immediately. Simple. Clean." Evelyn's jaw tightened. And Aaliyah Brooks? She witnessed everything. Daniel's eyes narrowed slightly. "I'll take care of her." 2 hours later, Aaliyah's name appeared on the HR department's morning schedule. She walked in cautiously, her shoes squeaking against the marble floor. The woman waiting for her behind the sleek desk smiled with corporate perfection. "Ms. Brooks, congratulations," she said. "You've been a valuable part of the New York Crest family." Aaliyah frowned. Valuable. The HR rep slid a slim folder across the table. Inside was a non-disclosure agreement, a final paycheck, and a letter thanking her for her service and discretion during a sensitive incident. "What is this?" Aaliyah asked. "A standard severance package," the woman said pleasantly. "You've worked long hours under unusual stress. Mr. Rothman wanted to personally thank you for your quick thinking last night, and ensure you have a comfortable transition." Aaliyah's eyes narrowed. "Transition to what?" "You're firing me." The woman didn't blink. "We're releasing you from your duties. With generous compensation. All we ask is that you don't speak publicly about the events in the ICU. Confidentiality is essential to patient privacy and hospital integrity." Aaliyah stared at the papers, heat rising in her chest. "You're paying me to stay quiet." "Think of it as appreciation," the HR rep replied smoothly. Aaliyah pushed the folder back across the desk. "People deserve to know what your machines did." The woman's smile faded. "Ms. Brooks," she said quietly, "sometimes the truth hurts more than it helps. Take the offer. You're young. Start fresh." But Aaliyah had seen too much. She stood up, voice trembling but firm. No amount of money can buy back a conscience. She walked out, her heart pounding like thunder. By nightfall, the hospital looked the same as always. Sterile, polished, indifferent. But Aaliyah could feel the eyes on her. Security guards lingered longer when she passed. Cameras seemed to tilt slightly in her direction. Even Luis, who'd helped her access the neural sync data, looked nervous when she found him in the maintenance wing. "Aaliyah," he whispered, glancing over his shoulder. "You shouldn't be here." "They're trying to bury it," she said, her voice low and urgent. "They're erasing every trace of what happened." Luis rubbed his face with both hands. "I know. I overheard IT this morning. They're wiping the central logs and tracking every device that accessed them. My credentials lit up red on the system audit." Her stomach dropped. "They know someone pulled the data." He nodded grimly. "And they'll figure out it was us. Daniel's personal security is already involved. They don't play around, Aaliyah. You need to get that flash drive out of here." She hesitated, glancing toward the door. "You're saying they'll come after me?" Luis leaned closer. "They can't afford a leak. And you're the only one who can expose them. That makes you dangerous." The hallway lights flickered as if on cue, the shadows deepening around them. Aaliyah's hands clenched into fists. "Then I'll make sure the truth doesn't die with me." That night, she returned home to the small apartment in Harlem she shared with her mother. The scent of chamomile tea and old furniture wrapped around her like armor. Her mother was asleep on the couch, TV humming softly with the evening news. Aaliyah moved quietly through the room, her clothes still damp from the drizzle outside. She went straight to her bedroom, knelt beside her old shoebox under the bed, and lifted the lid. Inside were a few photos, a folded church program, and a tiny porcelain angel that had belonged to her grandmother. She slipped the flash drive beneath the angel's base, securing it with a strip of tape. Then she whispered, "Keep this safe." For the first time that night, she allowed herself to breathe. But the feeling didn't last. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, a message from Luis. "Luis, they're checking home addresses. Delete your texts. Be careful." Her fingers hovered over the screen, trembling. Then another message came through, not from Luis. "Unknown number. Unknown. We know you have the file." Aaliyah froze. Her pulse thudded in her ears as she slowly looked toward the dark window, half expecting someone to be standing outside. Somewhere across the city, inside a glass office high above Manhattan, Daniel Rothman ended a phone call with his security chief. "Are we certain?" he asked, staring out over the skyline. The man's voice crackled through the speaker. "Yes, sir. The janitor still has the file." Daniel's reflection in the window looked calm, but his eyes burned with cold fury. "Then find her," he said, "before she finds anyone else." Aaliyah hadn't slept in 2 days. The city outside her window buzzed with life, but inside her small Harlem apartment, time had slowed to a crawl. The flash drive, the tiny piece of plastic that now held a billion-dollar secret, sat on the kitchen table beside a cold cup of coffee and her mother's trembling hands. "Baby," her mother whispered, "whatever this is, it's bigger than you. You don't go against men like him. They'll crush you." Aaliyah looked up, her eyes dark and tired. "Then let them try." Her mother sighed. "Your grandma said the same thing once, remember? The hospital where she was. Nobody listened until it was too late. You can't fight the system alone." "I'm not fighting for me," Aaliyah said quietly. "I'm fighting for her, for everyone who doesn't get heard." She slipped the flash drive into her pocket and stood. She already knew who to call. Nora Kim didn't answer unknown numbers. But when she saw the message that came with the missed call, "It's about neural sync," and the Rothmans, she called back within minutes. By nightfall, Aaliyah sat across from her in a narrow Chinatown cafe. Nora was younger than she looked on TV. Sharp features, eyes that didn't miss a thing. "You're saying you have hard data proving a neural sync malfunction?" Nora asked, voice low but steady. "Not a malfunction," Aaliyah said. "A cover-up." She slid the flash drive across the table. The system declared Clara Rothman unresponsive when she wasn't. And it's not the first time. Nora plugged the drive into her laptop. As lines of data filled the screen, her brows furrowed. These are post-procedure neural activity logs. If these are authentic, this changes everything. They're authentic, Aaliyah said. And there's more. Luis, a tech from the hospital, told me the NeuralSync database flagged similar, false readings in other hospitals. The system might have done this before. Nora looked up, her journalist's instinct already spinning. Then this isn't just a malfunction. It's a pattern. A corporate flaw being covered up. Aaliyah nodded. And it almost cost Clara her life. Nora's tone softened. You realize what happens once I publish this, right? They'll come after you. Hard. Aaliyah's voice didn't waver. I already lost my job. What else can they take? The story broke 48 hours later. Headlines spread like wildfire. Whistleblower Janitor exposes AI flaw in Rothman Biotech's NeuralSync. Clara Rothman's recovery raises questions about AI-driven medicine. Data leak suggests patients misdiagnosed across multiple states. By noon, every major network had picked up the story. Talk shows, news feeds, podcasts. The name Aaliyah Brooks was everywhere. Cameras swarmed outside her apartment building. Neighbors peeked through their doors, whispering. Strangers online called her a hero. Others called her a liar. Rothman Biotech stock plummeted 12% in a single day. The company's PR team released a vague statement about isolated anomalies under review. Daniel Rothman himself appeared briefly on CNBC, composed and polished, dismissing the reports as misinterpretations by unqualified personnel. But behind closed doors, panic spread. In her living room, Aaliyah watched the news with her mother. Her own face appeared on the screen, a photo from her employee ID paired with the headline, "The Janitor Who Saw the Impossible." Her mother clasped her hand, eyes wet. They're painting you like some kind of saint. Or villain. Aaliyah exhaled. Maybe both. Outside, reporters called her name through the intercom. Aaliyah, do you have a statement? Did Rothman threaten you? Is it true the data came from his private servers? Her mother moved to the window. They won't stop, honey. You have to be careful. Aaliyah turned away from the noise, her thoughts on Clara, still in recovery, shielded from the world. If Mrs. Rothman knew what was happening because of this, she'd want the truth out there. I know it. Her phone buzzed. A message from Nora. Nora, it's spreading internationally. European hospitals are pulling their NeuralSync contracts. You did it. Aaliyah stared at the words. For a moment, she allowed herself to breathe. But peace lasted only seconds before the next message appeared. Nora, be careful. Rothman's lawyers are moving fast. He's trying to discredit you. Across the city, inside Rothman Biotech's penthouse boardroom, Daniel stood at the head of a long glass table. His PR chief read from a tablet, voice trembling slightly. We're trending on every platform, sir. Over 8 million views on the leaked footage. Investors want answers. Daniel's jaw clenched. What about internal containment? The NeuralSync code has been scrubbed from our servers, but the leak's gone global. And the whistleblower. Daniel cut her off. A janitor, he said, his tone dripping with disdain. They're letting a janitor destroy a multi-billion-dollar technology. The PR chief hesitated. The narrative's shifting, sir. People are calling her the conscience of modern medicine. He turned away from the table, staring out the window at the skyline. Heroes are useful for a week, he said quietly. Then they burn. That night, the chaos reached its peak. Aaliyah's apartment was surrounded. News vans lined the block, their lights painting the street in red and blue. She drew the curtains shut, exhaustion pressing against her skull. Her mother held her hand tightly. "You should have taken the money," she whispered. "Now they're all going to come after you." "I couldn't," Aaliyah said. "Not when people are still using those machines." Her mother's voice cracked. "And if something happens to you?" Aaliyah met her eyes. "Then someone else will see it. Just like I did." At 2 a.m., Aaliyah uploaded the final piece of evidence. The ICU security footage. The moment Clara's hand had tapped on the table. The moment Aaliyah had shouted for help while everyone else looked away. She hit post and closed her laptop. Within minutes, the clip began to spread, retweeted, shared, mirrored. Hashtags filled the feed. Hashtag neural sync scandal, hashtag believe the janitor, hashtag see the impossible. For the first time, Aaliyah didn't feel invisible. But the victory was bittersweet. She knew exposure came with a price. In the morning, Daniel's phone buzzed with a secure call. His security chief's voice was tense. "Sir, we've contained what we can. But there's something else." Daniel pinched the bridge of his nose. "What now?" "She knows," the man said. "Clara." Daniel's breath caught. "Knows what?" "She saw the news broadcast from her room. She's asking for Aaliyah Brooks. Personally." For a long moment, Daniel said nothing. Then he looked out over the city skyline, his reflection hard and cold in the glass. "Set it up," he said finally. His voice was quiet, but the muscles in his jaw twitched. "I want to be there." The world outside New York Crest Medical Tower roared with headlines and flashing cameras, but inside the private recovery suite, everything was still. Light poured softly through the tall windows, falling across bouquets of lilies and white roses, gifts from people Clara Rothman had never met. The woman who'd once been hidden away under sterile lights now sat propped against a mountain of pillows, her skin pale but glowing with life. Aaliyah stood frozen at the doorway, clutching her visitor's badge like a lifeline. She had been escorted through 3 levels of security, briefed by lawyers, and told to keep the meeting brief. But none of that mattered now. Her heart thudded like it had that first night she saw Clara's fingers move. For a moment, neither woman spoke. Then Clara turned her head slightly, a gentle smile softening her features. "You're Aaliyah," she whispered, her voice thin but steady. "The woman who believed." Aaliyah's throat tightened. I just saw what everyone else missed." Clara's smile deepened. "No. You listened. There's a difference." The room fell quiet again, the silence heavy with all the things that didn't need words. Aaliyah took a hesitant step forward, then another. She stopped at the foot of the bed, her fingers trembling against the blanket. "You were tapping," she said softly. 3 times, then 2. I didn't understand what it meant. I just knew it wasn't random." Clara's eyes glistened as she nodded. 3 taps, pause, 2 taps, she whispered. "Morse code. It means I'm here." Aaliyah's breath caught. I knew it meant something. Tears welled in her eyes, spilling over before she could stop them. I tried to tell them. I begged them to look. But nobody believed me. They said I was confused, that I didn't understand what I saw. Clara reached out with a trembling hand. Aaliyah instinctively took it, feeling warmth there. Fragile, human, and real. "You didn't give up," Clara murmured. "You brought me back. You reminded me that sometimes faith is louder than science." The words broke Aaliyah. All the exhaustion, fear, and loneliness she'd carried through those sleepless nights came pouring out as quiet sobs. Clara squeezed her hand weakly. "You've got a brave heart, Aaliyah. The kind this world forgets it needs." The door opened softly, and the hum of the hospital returned. Faint voices, distant monitors. Aaliyah turned, wiping her tears quickly. Daniel Rothman stood in the doorway. He looked nothing like the powerful billionaire from the news. His perfect posture had wilted. His face was drawn, eyes rimmed red with sleepless guilt. For a long moment, he just looked at his wife, alive, fragile, radiant. Then his gaze shifted to Aaliyah, and for once, there was no authority in it. Just shame. "Daniel," Clara said quietly, her tone calm but firm. "Come here." He obeyed, stepping forward slowly, his polished shoes almost soundless on the marble floor. "Do you know why you're standing here right now?" Clara asked. Daniel swallowed hard. "Because of the doctors. Because the procedure." No, her voice was sharp enough to cut him off. Because she refused to stay silent. He turned toward Aaliyah. For a moment, their eyes met. Two worlds colliding. The billionaire who built an empire on innovation, and the janitor who'd seen what his machines could not. "If she hadn't believed," Clara continued softly, "I'd be gone. You would have buried me, Daniel, and called it progress." Her words landed like a blow. Daniel's jaw tensed. His throat moved, but no sound came out. Clara reached for his hand. "You've spent your life building things that control life and death. But the real power isn't in the machines you make. It's in what you do when they fail." For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, finally, his shoulders slumped. "I was terrified," he admitted quietly, "of losing you. Of losing everything. So I tried to control it the only way I knew how, by hiding it." Aaliyah's voice was steady now. "You can't fix truth by burying it, Mr. Rothman." He nodded slowly, eyes distant. "No," he said. "You can't." Clara's tone softened. "Then do something good with your power, Daniel. Don't fight the truth. Stand beside it." He looked at her, then at Aaliyah. For the first time, there was something human in his eyes, the faint glimmer of a man realizing how far he'd fallen from himself. "What do you want me to do?" he asked. "Help her," Clara said simply. "Make this right. Not for me, not for your company. For everyone who's ever been ignored because they didn't wear a badge or a title." A silence stretched between them, heavy, raw, full of consequence. Finally, Daniel exhaled, a long, broken sound. "All right," he said. "I'll cooperate with the investigation. I'll release every neural sync record for independent review. No filters, no spin." Clara's smile was faint but proud. "Good." He looked back at Aaliyah. "And you'll stand with us when we make the announcement." Her brow furrowed. "You want me there?" Daniel nodded. "The world needs to see you. The truth should come from the one who saw it first." Aaliyah hesitated, the weight of it all pressing against her chest. "People don't listen to janitors," she said quietly. Daniel's gaze didn't waver. "They will now." The moment felt unreal, the sterile hospital lights softening around them, the tension melting into something fragile and new. For the first time, Aaliyah saw not the billionaire who had ordered her silence, but a man trying to find redemption through the wreckage he'd created. Clara looked between them, her voice barely above a whisper. "Promise me both of you will face them. Together. No more hiding." Daniel nodded. "I promise." Aaliyah took a deep breath and nodded too. "Good," Clara said, leaning back against her pillows. "Then let the truth heal more than it hurt." As Aaliyah left the room, she glanced back one last time. Clara was smiling faintly, Daniel standing beside her. Two lives forever altered by one moment of courage. Outside, the hallway buzzed faintly with reporters' voices beyond the hospital's glass doors. Tomorrow, the world would see them all standing together. The billionaire, his wife, and the janitor who refused to look away. For now, though, Aaliyah just walked down the corridor, her heart steady, her steps sure. The story wasn't over. But for the first time, it finally felt right. 6 months later, the world had changed. At least, that's what the headline said. Medicine's Human Revolution. When a janitor saved the billionaire's wife and changed AI forever. But inside the grand auditorium of the New York Global Health Summit, Aaliyah Brooks still felt like the same woman who'd once pushed a mop down those glossy hospital halls. The lights above her shimmered like 1,000 tiny stars. Rows of cameras lined the stage, their red dots blinking. Reporters, investors, doctors, and students filled the seats, waiting for the official launch of something new. Something born from the chaos, the miracle, and the courage that had turned the medical world upside down. A large banner hung behind the stage. The Brooks, Rothman Initiative Integrating Human Insight with Artificial Intelligence in Healthcare. The words glowed against a backdrop of deep blue, the color of renewal. Aaliyah stood beside Daniel and Clara Rothman. Daniel looked composed in his dark suit, but there was a quiet humility in his posture now, a softness that hadn't been there before. And Clara, radiant, recovered, and strong, stood with her hand gently resting on her husband's arm. 6 months ago, this trio would have been unimaginable. Now they were bound by something deeper than circumstance, truth. Daniel stepped forward first, his voice calm and measured. 6 months ago, he began, my wife's life was saved not by technology, not by fortune, but by faith, by one woman's belief that what she saw and what she felt mattered. The room was silent, the kind of silence that listens. He continued, for years I built systems that measured everything: data, heart rates, brainwaves, oxygen levels. And yet, I forgot to measure the most vital element of all, human instinct. Daniel turned slightly toward Aaliyah, his gaze filled with quiet respect. Aaliyah Brooks reminded all of us, that no algorithm can replace empathy. No machine can see what the heart refuses to ignore. A ripple of applause rose from the crowd. He paused, looking out at the cameras. Today, we're launching the Brooks Rothman Initiative, a global program that will integrate human observation into AI medical protocols. From janitors to nurses, from orderlies to technicians, every hospital worker will have a voice in patient safety. Because medicine should serve humanity, not the other way around. He turned to Aaliyah. And the woman who inspired this. She's here to tell you why this matters. Aaliyah's legs felt heavy as she stepped up to the podium. The lights were blinding, the cameras relentless. But when she glanced toward Clara, who smiled encouragingly, her fear melted away. She adjusted the microphone, her voice steady but full of quiet power. When you're invisible, she began, you see what others overlook. A murmur rippled through the audience. People leaning forward, drawn to her tone. I used to believe that my job was just to clean up after everyone else, she said. To stay quiet. To keep my head down. But one night, in a hospital full of experts and machines, I saw something that didn't make sense, and I refused to look away. Her voice grew firmer. What happened to Clara Rothman wasn't just a medical event. It was a reminder that progress without conscience is just power without purpose. Aaliyah paused, letting the words sink in. The world doesn't change when power speaks, she said softly. It changes when truth refuses to stay quiet. The auditorium erupted in applause. Some stood, clapping, others wiping away tears. The moment felt like a heartbeat that belonged to everyone. Aaliyah looked out over the crowd, faces from every walk of life, and for the first time in her life, she didn't feel small. She felt seen. After the applause faded, Clara stepped forward, taking her place beside Aaliyah at the podium. Her voice, though gentle, carried through the hall like music. When I was lying there between silence and life, I kept thinking, someone will see me. Someone will notice. But it wasn't the machines that found me. It was her. She turned to Aaliyah, eyes full of warmth. You didn't just save my life, Aaliyah. You restored my faith in people. A hush fell over the audience as Clara lifted her hand and tapped softly against her chest. 3 short taps. Pause. 2 more. Aaliyah's breath caught. She knew the code instantly. I'm here. A smile spread across her face as tears welled in her eyes. She nodded, whispering, I know. The camera zoomed in, capturing the moment. 2 women bound by an invisible rhythm that spoke louder than words. The applause that followed wasn't polite or professional. It was human. Raw, thunderous, and real. After the press conference, as the crowd dispersed and the cameras dimmed, Daniel approached Aaliyah privately. You were right, he said quietly. About everything. Aaliyah smiled faintly. It wasn't about being right. It was about not pretending anymore. He nodded. For what it's worth. Thank you. For saving her. For saving me in a way. Aaliyah looked him in the eye. Then make sure this isn't just a headline. Daniel smiled, small, genuine. It won't be. He turned toward the exit, his security team waiting nearby, but he paused before leaving. You know, he said, glancing back at her, the world might remember me as the man who built Neural Sync, but I'd rather they remember you, the woman who made it human. Later that evening, as the city lights shimmered below the skyscraper windows, Aaliyah stood alone on the balcony of her new office, a modest space within the Brooks, Rothman Initiative headquarters. She looked down at the streets of New York, at the same hospital where it all began. She could still see herself pushing that mop, invisible to everyone. Except this time, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt peaceful. A cool wind brushed against her face as she whispered to the city below. We're all here now. The next morning, newspapers around the world carried the same headline. Brooks, Rothman Initiative launches. A new era of human medicine. Below it, a photo captured the moment Clara had tapped her chest beside Aaliyah. And the caption read, Because one woman who mopped floors refused to ignore the impossible.
Thank you for watching this story. If this moved you, leave a comment below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the videos on your screen to watch more powerful stories just like this.